All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the third session for the day. Environment and Opportunities 2. We have here Mr. Bhupesh Joshi, who's going to be the moderator for the session today, Mr. Dubey, Mr. Whipp, Mr. Louis Pinto, and of course, Air Commander AM Ganapathy. Can we please have Mr. Bhupesh Joshi on stage to start the session? Thank you.
I think we'll have to give a couple of more minutes for people to settle down. There's a lot of them outside, but I'll take this couple of minutes to introduce my panelists. We have Mr. Dubey from KPMG, Mr. Louis from NetJets, Mr. Whipp from Kennedy's Law, and Air Commodore Ganapathy from CBAS. Thank you and welcome all of you. I know both of you have flown from far away to be with us, so a special thank you to both of you to be here. As the format has been, we'll give you 7 to 10 minutes to show your presentation and the topics that you got. There'll be some question-answer session at the end of that. I'm very happy that as BAOA, part of BAOA, we've really done this, and we're looking forward to really take this in a meaningful manner with the ministry in our deliberations moving forward from here. So I would request each one of you to give your inputs, which our President Rohit Kapoor said in the morning, and as your comments. We are, engaging more and more with the help of Group Captain Bali and the entire team with DGCA and with the ministry. So it will really help us in our engagements to take your views and your inputs forward. Thank you once again. I am not going to speak anything. I'm just going to be here listening to all the speakers here, and they have a lot to tell us. So I'm going to go one by one and talk to them. Thank you. So I'm going to start with Amber. Amber doesn't need any introduction, authority on the subject, and has been, advising almost every category and every segment of the industry, from the operator to airport operators to MROs and everyone. So you had the share of everyone. So you can really tell us. Since morning we've been hearing that by 2030 or 2035 we're going to be largest aviation sector. On one side, that's very nice, and then we also heard that if we are the fastest, then what other industries are doing. So actually we have really not grown. President also said that to 2020 is not far, and how are we going to reach there? So how do you envisage, and what do you envisage? As an industry, we should do. How do you envisage, government's role really being effective? But I think you really have a depth in all areas of the subject. So, request you to open up and tell us. Take your time, 5-6 minutes.
Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Bhupesh. Dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen from the General Aviation community. I'll take exactly 6 minutes because all the intelligent things that had to be said have already been said. Okay, let's start with the harsh truths. General aviation is not a priority for India. Okay, that's the harsh truth. We are looked down upon. Okay, because you're the rich man's. It's like golf. So anything we need to do for golf or for business aviation is not politically correct. I don't know if Mr. Ashok Kumar is still around. Okay. He knew it. And airports don't want you because naturally every time you land, you're blocking precious parking space and these landing slots. Rohit rightly mentioned about the frequent changes in leadership. It beats the hell out of us. I mean, we just had started working with Ashok Lavasa, the previous secretary, and in 6 months he was gone. The new gentleman has come in, he's shown earnestness, he's doing lots of those roundtables, but I mean, let's face it, even 20 years later, we are still learning. My global head of aerospace and defense is here, 20 years with Lockheed, 10 years with KPMG. He's still learning, and you always wonder what these gentlemen, with all due respect, these are some of the brilliant administrators we have in the name of IAS, when they come in here, how much can they gain in 6 months? So that's a big tragedy. Then in terms of MRO, we just had a brilliant session from Bharat and Pulak, pilot training, infrastructure issues, and of course the biggest of them is the customs duty. So I guess everything has been spoken about. There's no clear solution in sight. The ministry, for the ministry, this is it's not even a priority. Let's not call it a low priority. It's not even a consideration point. So now, in terms of action steps, because there's no point doing breast beating, but let's focus more on actions. What do we do from the Monday action plan, as we call it, from Monday onwards? I think it's very simple. The 3 simple things you need to do is engage, engage, and engage, which you're doing anyways. I mean, the gentleman has just left. I mean, I'm sure he has other things to do, but I mean, it's nice of him to at least come down. It's one of those rare conferences where at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, you see a ministry person actually sitting and listening to this. A lot of this is actually government bashing, but we're doing it because we want the sector to come up. We need to engage with the ministry to at least set up a task force. I mean, we've seen that in MRO, the amount of noise that we have created, and I'm sure Bharat, if he's still around, and Pulak, and as Mr. Ashok Kumar also agreed, that every year something's happened. Something, even in the worst year when Pranab presented his budget, or then Chidambaram presented, the only talk he did was of MRO. It was first made for 90 days free for customs duty. Next time it was made for 1 year. Of course, we want it in perpetuity, just like booze. Booze can be either tax paid or tax free. You cannot say booze is tax free for 1 year. If you consume, if you don't consume, then we'll charge you on the 366th day. It's as ridiculous as that. So I'm sure good things will happen. But MRO has achieved only by engaging, and I mean, hats off to Pulakda if he's still around or grabbing a coffee outside. But hats off to him. He's been, I would, with all due respects to Pulakda, shameless. We got to be shameless. Pulakda has just come in. Well, I was just appreciating the fact that, I mean, what you've achieved in MRO is huge. I think we in the General Aviation look up to, we look up to you, what you've done. And I think this is the only way to go. Just go bang, 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 be shameless. With all due respect, as I said, you got to be shameless. I mean, the number of pursuits we have to do to the ministry, they'll lock the door on you, but we have to keep trying. We also have to change the narrative a little. I think this is a request to Rohit, my good friend Rohit, and Group Captain Bali and the team, that so far we're only talking about our problems. Why don't we talk about the positives that we bring in? Nation building, job creation. These things cannot happen. I mean, we think nation building is a very high term which only Modi or Parikar can talk. No, we also do nation building. When there are places, I was talking to Vineet Phatak, in the 200 airfields which we use, all the commercial airlines put together, they only serve 35, 40. If you look at their websites, 35, 40 locations that they serve. You serve 200. Why don't we talk about it? So this is nation building. You're creating jobs. And jobs is what India needs. I mean, millions and millions, 20 million population gets added up every year. That's like on Australia or Canada, gets added to India every year. Half of them get into the job field. Where are the jobs? And as I say, the unemployed man makes the best murderer, rapist, and a political worker. Let's not create more of such. Okay. Next is on this GA airports. I was talking to Douglas Gates, and we can chat with him later, with years of experience. He's saying, why are we even expecting that the Mumbais and the cramped airports, like Goas and the Mumbais, will give us space, and we keep petitioning to the government? It's the same thing in Los Angeles or New York or Chicago, any other place. They don't allow general aviation because it just doesn't make sense. But what instead the government does and facilitates is having the small, tiny city airports close by where people just drive up. In fact, it works out as a win-win for both. Even the top corporates or the charter people, and for the large airports. It just works out as a win-win because you don't cramp the space, and you have absolute freedom. The costs are low, so I mean all the other costs which are loaded up can get deflated by a low-cost airfield with just a little bit of security, safety, and very skeletal staff. So abroad also in US, which is the mecca of general aviation, this is how it happens. We have to push for consolidation, that within the industry also we'll have our own agreements, disagreements, egos and super egos. But somehow at the ministry level we'll have to forget all that. all those differences get together. We have seen the same thing in MRO also, but I mean, when we go as a group, and we've seen good things happen. We've even drafted the MRO policy for the ministry. I mean, we stayed up night for 2 nights in a row, and 31st March, we had to give it last year. Of course, nothing happened after that. That's a separate issue. But the whole industry got together and prepared that document, which we then gave it to Mr. Ashok Kumar and Anil Srivastav there. And for DGC, of course, we had to push for more and more online applications. Even I was talking to Vineet, and the amount of trouble we go to get the DM's approval, and the police guy, the fire guy. There's so many authorities whom you have to chase and get their permissions for. Almost there. Just one more minute, right? So we have to get most of these things done online, and this will again not happen without the struggle. So again, we go back to the same 3 action points: engage, engage, and engage. Let's give some demo rides to our netas and babus. Let's take them around on rides. I know this is going to cost us, but unless they touch and feel it, they'll not realize that where all are we creating the access to? The big cities are all covered, but the interiors of India, GA is the only way you can get there. Right? Unless they go there, they'll not feel it. They do it. Some of the big ones do it. Modi doesn't need to be explained, but the lower netas, who also are a voice, have to be convinced here. And last but not the least, I think, again, MRO of GA, because MRO for larger aircrafts, we're anyway fighting very hard, but it'll take some time to create that whole Changi or a Dubai type of or a Sri Lanka type of infrastructure in India before the Indigos and the SpiceJets and everybody start using our facilities. But the MRO for GA, that has sort of reached a maturity scale. I mean, the Airworks and the Maxes and Indemers and others. And I think this can be a game changer. If we can somehow get more facilities for the MROs and get more and more GA aircrafts to come in, I think the word will spread and they'll realize the value that GA adds. I'll stop here, and we can obviously take more questions later on. Thank you so much. Sorry.
But thank you. I think that was really, really precise. But you rightly hit the nail. And that's what, as BOA, we've started doing since last 1 year. I think our engagement levels have really gone up, and more engagement will really help us to open their eyes and their hearts, and the way they interpret the rules. I mean, it's all left on interpretation at the moment. It's not on implementation. So once they interpret it rightly, I'm sure they'll help us to implement it as well. I, as a charter operator, one of the largest and the oldest in India, still, look forward. And when I look forward, I look at NetJets and VistaJets. And so I'm happy to have someone from NetJet who is here. That one question that always, comes up in my mind is that, how can we scale up to that size? You've done it. So we have Louis Pinto, who is here. You have done it in other countries. You've done it in US and Europe. How do you do it in less developed countries or countries where the general aviation is still developing? And what are your challenges, and how do you see it doing it in India if you were to do it? And give us your inputs and some advice on that.
Thank you. So, is the presentation there? Yeah. I've only got 6.5 minutes. So we'll just do this quickly. I think one of the issues that you have in India is there's too many people going up to the ministries and back to the TGCAs. Pay your dues with the association. The more associates in the association, the bigger the voice you have, the more money you have, and the more you can do back at the ministries with the tax lawyers and with the lawyers as well. We use Kennedy's and KPMG just about every other month, because even in Europe we have our own issues as well. And if you think you've got slot issues and airport issues, just give you a quick update. Heathrow, you've got 10 slots a day for business aviation. They charge you £5,000 per departure. You want to go to London City? That's great, £3,250 per departure. So don't worry about Mumbai. That's the least of your worries. So if we go on, there we go. Okay. Right, so the advantages and challenges of business aviation and fractional. Availability. I mean, if you're sort of fractional, you've got a lot of availability. You've got to scale up. One thing we've noticed is we're going to be, by February of next year, 20 years in Europe, 50 years in the US. It has taken us 20 years and 50 years to get to the scale we currently have, both in the US and in Europe. The old joke continues today. How do you become a millionaire in business aviation? You start out as a billionaire. There is no quick win. You've really got to have, as somebody said earlier on this afternoon, is that fire in you to just pursue and pursue and pursue. Availability is what it's all about. If you don't have excess aircraft or core aircraft, don't bother. Then rather stay in the charter market or manage your own aircraft. Otherwise, you will be losing money. On the flexibility, your client wants to know that you've got enough flexibility, either throughout the day, throughout the month, or even through peak periods. So what we call peak periods are, for instance, back in the US, is President's Weekend and any other major holiday. They've got over 1,000 flights on a particular weekend or on a particular day. If you don't have at least 70 to 80% of your clients fulfilled, their needs fulfilled, don't bother. You're going to be losing clients very quickly. So there's advantages to all of this if you're a client, but if you don't have the scale, you're going to be losing clients as well. Discretion. A lot of your clients or our clients doesn't want anybody to know who's getting on that plane, especially when it comes to paparazzi, and that's big here in India as well. So if you've got clients that want discretion, don't publish the names all over the show. You lose them as well. So when it comes to fractional flying, because there's quite a number of high-end users, we don't publish the name. The FBO only gets to know about the name right at the end. The authorities obviously get to know about the names as soon as they have to for authorization, security purposes. But when it comes to FBOs, we try and keep those as quiet as we can. So clients love that as well. Predictable costs. They know that they've got to pay a monthly management fee, and they know what the rate per hour is, except when you go to Heathrow or London City or even the States. There's some major airports where you're already being paid high-end fees. They're paying per month and per flight. And then there's no positioning charges. So what you can't do is set up a fractional, even in India, and say, I'll only operate between 2 or 3 states. After that, everything else, you're going to have to pay positioning. Well, that doesn't work if you're doing fractional. Because if you want to do that, rather stick to the business you're currently in. So you've got to have the scale in order not to charge positioning flights. And again, I've just put some examples of NetJets. These are our non-positioning flights that we currently have. So without Europe, Brazil, China, etc. Now in India, if you would create a fractional ownership, then I'd say, make sure that all your neighbors around the area, there are no positioning flights. So if you're going out to Singapore, you've got to go and pick up that client, and bring him back without charging him for positioning. Otherwise, it is cheaper to do that on a charter flight. The challenges. The challenges of own aircraft versus charter and fractional. Again, anonymity, charter, on those peak period days when you've got 600 or 300 or even 50 flights and you've only got 20 aircraft, you better have a plan for that. So in India, one of the issues we have is getting enough aircraft when we're flying in India. So the other day we had a client that was looking to fly within India 45 of their staff. Very difficult to find enough aircraft that will cater for that. So although there's 1 or 2 and 3 aircraft operators, there's not enough in a cluster to take you along. So again, if you want to do fractional, you've got to have the aircraft or team up. There's too many of you here in India that have 1 and 2 aircraft. That doesn't have scale. Your costs are terribly high. You need to bring those costs down, and that's all on scalability as well. And we all know that every time you have a certificate, you need 4, 5, 6, 7 post holders. To give you an idea, NetJets started up in China. For their MRO business, they were required to have 45 people on that certificate, even with 0 aircraft to start with. So you need to know exactly what you're doing in each country, and the costs as well. If you've got your own aircraft, you know all the admin burdens that you have. So you need somebody to do the paperwork, and especially when it comes down to the maintenance part, that's even more difficult. Unless, of course, you're with one of our colleagues over here from JSSI, that is much easier. You don't need the core aircraft. You can either charter or go outside. And then maintenance, as somebody said, if you've got your own aircraft and if you've only got one or two, you know that your aircraft's going to be out of service 2 to 3 months every year, especially when it comes to the older aircraft. Those can be out for many more months. Just very quickly on, just to give you the size of NetJets, the only reason we're still here is because of scalability, okay? And the fact that we're backed by somebody with a lot of money. Because when the crisis hit, I think it hit a lot of people. A lot of people lost their jobs and lost their businesses. And they scaled down quite significantly as well. The other thing we're all looking at is flight data monitoring, which I think that's becoming regulatory as well. And again, this is important about non-positioning. If you want to have a fractional, you've got to have those non-positioning charges. So to give you an idea, on fractional, it is cheaper to fly out and back than what it is on charter. But on charter, it is cheaper to fly one way than what it is on fractional. And then, all about India, again, I think the big issue is become an associate member of the association itself. That's the only way you're going to get around these things. Because if the minister gets to meet 20 people every day, I think he's got better things to do. That's it. Okay.
Thank you, Louis. That was really a great presentation. And yes, I think the message is very loud and clear. We need to strengthen ourselves. We need to group ourselves, not only in terms of joining the association or being together, but even for the scalability. So we saw that management presentation earlier. So there are a lot of things that are doable and which is coming out of this conference, which is good. Fire in the belly, accepted. Fire in the pocket, I don't think accepted. So, I think we need to take some support over there where, how we can stop these fires and contain these fires so that they are directed to the right way. The regulatories and financial implications, for how we are doing it, what we are doing it, who better than Kennedy Law. So may I request you, Roger, to tell us how how you see us and how can we, benefit from some of the laws that aviation industry worldwide is using it, which are we using it, we are not using it. I don't know whether you're prepared for this question, but this is what we are looking at. Maintenance and flying hours agreement will definitely take support from everyone, but these are some burning questions that we have. Are we really touching upon right laws? If we are not, then how can we do that? What are the areas that we should look at? Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll do my best in 7 minutes. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. I apologise you're going to have to listen to a lawyer for a few minutes, but it really will only be a few minutes. I'd like to congratulate the organisers on this day. I think it's been an excellent conference and some really interesting discussions. And although I personally have made several visits to India, it's been very informative. And I've attended conferences similar to this in various parts of the world. And, I have to say, I think it's a very positive environment here in India. And I think, to be congratulated. And for the representative from the government to be here today and to stay for so long and listen carefully and contribute is really impressive. And it bodes well, I think, for the future. You would not get the same level of involvement in other parts of the world, I can assure you. So, it really is, I think, good news for India, and I think the future is good. And certainly Kennedy's, the company that, the law firm that I am a partner in, is very excited about the business aviation and wider aviation industry in India. We have a referral relationship with a very well-known Indian law firm called Kaitan & Co., who I think many of you will know. And together we bring a level of expertise to clients within India. Kaitan & Co. obviously renowned within India for their expertise. And with Kennedy's international experience, particularly in the aviation field, where we have a dedicated aviation team, we think we bring a lot for clients within this jurisdiction. My own background, just so you understand, is not in business aviation at all. It's within the airline industry. I was 11 years as in-house legal advisor to British Airways. And since leaving British Airways, I've worked in private practice, and both with airline clients and clients within business aviation. Mainly in business aviation, it's been with the sort of MRO companies, in fact. My own particular expertise, as it's apparent from the topic, which was on the list, is in maintenance agreements, and in particular, the last few years, I've spent most of my time working on these power-by-the-hour maintenance deals, which are very, very common now within the airline industry, and I think increasingly common within business aviation as well. It's striking, though, that although MROs are quite keen to ensure that their contracts are up to the mark in terms of, well, yes, they're concerned about their liability position, of course, but also in terms of the accuracy of the content of those agreements and the fact that they comply with regulatory requirements. It's striking that actually within the business aviation community, and this is, I'm not talking about India, I'm just talking generally, operators very rarely, it seems in my experience, seek any advice on these agreements, which I think is quite surprising. So what is, and I'm really taking power by the hour just as an example here. I think my message really is that the industry has to take its contracts seriously, because all these relationships are complex, and very often not sufficient attention is paid to the actual documents, the formal documents that govern those relationships and the liabilities between the parties and the responsibility of the parties. And if I take power by the hour deals as a particular example, well, they're rather complicated. And they take very many different forms. And airlines, I can tell you, because I've spent a lot of time working with them, spend an awful lot of time and effort trying to get them right, because they are expensive. It's one of the most expensive aspects of maintaining your aircraft. The engines, obviously, being a major cost. So just pick up perhaps one or two aspects of those agreements which deserve some attention. Well, the critical thing about a power-by-the-hour deal, which of course is restricted to paying for the cost of maintenance on the engine, is that there should be a transfer of risk between the operator and the service provider. That is absolutely the key thing. Yes, it's helpful to the operator that the cost is spread on a power-by-the-hour basis, but the key thing is risk transfer. And very often, that risk transfer, when you get into the detail of the agreement, isn't necessarily where it should be. So something that needs to be addressed. Control of services is another big issue. The operator maintains responsibility for the airworthiness of the aircraft, but of course the control what services are provided at what time is driving the cost incurred by the service provider. So the service provider often, for perfectly understandable reasons, wants to have a level of control over how those costs are incurred. And sometimes it's inappropriate. The line is crossed. And operators need to be aware of that, and so do service providers. None of this is intended to be pro-operator or pro-service provider. All of these things are important for both parties to get the level right. Scope of the services is another area where I found in my experience that problems arise. Simply, and it's almost unbelievable, but simply the parties not actually fully understanding what is covered and what is not covered within the agreement. extraordinary, but it's happened, and even between some very sizable companies, I can assure you. And that's not good from a regulatory point of view either, because from a regulatory point of view, it should be absolutely clear within the contract who's responsible for what maintenance. And finally, the last point perhaps to mention, which is certainly when it comes to leased aircraft, a really huge issue, which even some of the biggest OEMs are still only just getting their heads around, is the issue of portability. A very, very key issue. If you're paying money into a program as an operator, you want that benefit to be portable when you part company with that aircraft to a new owner. Really significant issues financially, and in terms of the value of the asset. All I can say is please pay attention to these issues, and as the industry grows, particularly within the business aviation sector, pay proper attention to your contracts. Seek advice if you need it, and good luck for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. We have Mr. Commodore M. Ganapathy from CBAS. He's going to tell us about SMS and way forward with the SMS that we're going to be implementing in.
Good evening, everybody. The subject seems serious, and as it should be. It's held at the end of the session, but I think we're all aware that nothing is going to move unless and until you have your safety in the right place. On a lighter note, just a couple of days back, my daughter and son-in-law were traveling to Australia to watch the cricket series out there. And for a long time, as you're all aware here, there's a big line up for visas. And getting seats on an airline was very, very difficult. And they wouldn't tell me which airline they were traveling by. At the end of the day, I could only ask them after they left as to which airline you travel by. And my daughter whispered over the telephone and said, Malaysian Airlines. And she said, Papa, don't say anything more. Now this sums up what happens when an accident occurs. It has global ramifications. It's not just local. And with the kind of aircraft that you guys are flying and operating, the business jet today is no less than an airliner in terms of performance, complexity, range, passenger load, etc., etc. Airline aircraft themselves are now being used as business jets. So the importance of SMS, everybody agrees. And we, at the moment here in India, are going through a difficult time because of the downgrade by the FAA. It's not that we've been downgraded just an odd time. We're all aware we've been downgraded more than once. FAA on a number of occasions, ICAO before that. What's happening and why is it happening? SMS is an evolution from flight safety and is necessary for everybody to understand it. It is not too difficult to implement provided the will is there, but it is a little complex, and it's come about today, this evolution, by a couple of factors, and the major factor is one of globalization. So when you have a foreign airliner or an aircraft operating into Indian airspace or into any other country, people are concerned as to what sort of environment they're going into and what are the safety issues involved as far as the infrastructure is concerned. It does and has affected general aviation in India. So with this as a background, let's see this topic of mine, which I'm supposed to advise as to what is the best or the world-class SMS for India, for our GA in India, and how to go about it. So the best way I thought is, first of all, to go through what is the ICAO standard oversight, followed by international regulators such as EASA and FAA, what is their view on it. International GA associations like the IBAC, EBAA, and the NBAA, briefly to be touched upon. Before I go on to the Indian GA industry, what is the present situation now? what needs to be done, and a couple of recommendations. As far as ICAO is concerned, we need to understand that there's been a paradigm shift with Annex 19 coming in. It's coming in after 30 years of consolidation. And with this, there is this aspect of oversight that needs to be looked at, not only from the regulator's point of view, but that of the industry. Because today, we are changing over from a prescriptive mode or an approach to a collaborative approach. And that is something that we need to take up with our regulator and get them to understand that it's important to talk to the industry, because the industry often is well ahead of the regulator in many ways to changes that are happening. So they need to work together. And let's see what ICAO says. They have a document called the Document 9734, which is an oversight manual. And here's a very important para, 2.4.4, which says that non-involvement of the industry, this is to the regulator he's saying, could lead to lowering of safety standards as a result of low morale of the aviation industry. It could also be cost prohibitive for the state to maintain the large enforcement organization required to sustain this level of oversight. Now, this caution is of great relevance to us and the situation that presently confronts the Indian GA industry. Indian GA aircraft numbers has dropped from 422 in 2012 to around about 316 today. And we've seen a series of steps taken by the regulator, which has resulted in some steps being taken by industry, some people getting rid of the aircraft, etc., etc. Let's see what some of the international regulators say. What does EASA say? EASA today is looking at TCO authorization, or third country operators, special authorization for them, issued by EASA. They're giving you 2 years in which to come up to required international best practices. And if they're not convinced about it, they're not going to let you enter the airspace after November 2016. If you go to the website, in November 2014, you should have started applying for these authorizations into the EU. So post 2016, no flights will be permitted into EU airspace unless the operator possesses a TCO authorization. This is going to hit your bottom line if you don't get that authorization going. Those who have missed the November 2014 deadline are already at a disadvantage in India. And there is a huge backlog that EASA is required to clear. They also carry out a country-wise risk analysis and assessment. Includes issues such as downgrading by other agencies. Operators in India holding internationally recognized standards such as the ISBO, IO, for airlines, etc., are eligible for bonus ratings when you go through this authorization process with EASA. Requirement of EASA today is that SMS integration with legacy safety systems must also be in place. All mentioned in their website. So you can see how the regulators are moving as far as safety is concerned. A paradigm shift has definitely taken place. This kind of oversight and this kind of insistence hasn't been there before. They've also said that the standards that you go for must be dovetailed into the regulatory oversight process in your country. Let's see what FAA says. You'll be surprised to know that there is no final rule on SMS implementation till very recently in America. The final rule position for SMS implementation for Part 121 operators, which is airlines, has only just come in, dated 5th of January 2015. But the FAA has not been quiet. They've been carrying out a very interesting experiment with their industry for more than 5 to 6 years. And they've sat down with airline operators, general aviation operators, BA operators, airports, MROs, ATCs, all the aviation domains that requires SMS, because the principles and theory and concept of SMS doesn't change across industries. Even outside the aviation industry, it remains the same. So they have worked very hard at carrying out pilot projects and only then legislated a rule for Part 1-to-1 operators. And it's only just come in. And it's very detailed, it's very interesting how the regulator has got in touch with more than 65 major operators and entities and organizations, including Boeing, Airbus, and everybody else. And they've got talking with them, and they've come out with this plan, and they've now put this into practice as far as airlines are concerned, and the airlines have accepted it because they've been part of that pilot project. We don't have that kind of a system and engagement over here. It's necessary to have it. I was just talking to Dr. Gohen, the ex-DG of DGCA, and he was mentioning a little earlier the need for change within the regulatory authorities. And that's a nice thing for him to come out with. But it's also true that industry has to change. We need to see whether we are really regulating ourselves voluntarily or not. Because that's the way everybody else has gone or developed nations have gone. So in spite of the fact that in America, the SMS rule was mandated for airlines and had not yet been mandated for GA, not yet been mandated even for BA or any of the commercial operations on GA aircraft as yet, the majority of people involved in business aviation have gone in to implement best practices in America. And a classic example is the BA, Business Aviation Fraternity, who have implemented these BAO programs and other types of programs available like charter operators, standard, etc. So if they're doing it on their own, are we doing it as an industry is something that we need to question ourselves about. In the US, they filed for differences with ICAO on SMS and took their time about implementing it. We haven't done that, and as a result, we are fairly behind almost 3 years behind the deadline of 2009 when SMS should have been introduced in India as far as ICAO is concerned. A brief mention on a company or an establishment called MITA, Massachusetts Institute of Technology Research, who have worked with the FAA and with their Aviation Institute to study and work with industry. They work with the industry to get all the input from industry, but to keep the inputs as to who has given them data and information confidential. But they take lessons from this after doing the necessary research and go to FAA and say, this is the rule position that you should come out with. And then the FAA looks into it and studies it, and then they collaborate with the industry and say, we're going to come out with this rule position. That's the kind of depth that they go into over there. What about general aviation associations internationally? Look what IBAC has done. The ISBO is a gold standard for air safety today, well recognized. As Dr. Kurt Edwards has said, more than 700 companies have already implemented the ISBO, and a number of regulators, international regulators, recognizes the ISBO as a means to SMS implementation as mandated by ICAO. Because you need to know and understand what exactly is the standard, how do you go about complying with it, are you meeting those high standards requirement or the minimum standards of ICAO, etc., etc. So the IBAC has come out with the ISBO program for aircraft operators. They've got a manual which tells you exactly what the standards are. It gives you a lot of guidance material. It gives you tools on how to go about doing it. And they also give you a manual for auditing and tell you how to go about your own evaluation and audit. A very detailed protocol system of 30, 40 pages that covers from nose to tail everything you need to know about safety as far as your aircraft operations are concerned. What is EBAA doing? The president of EBAA, Fabio Gamba, he's been recommending to his people that implement the ISBO or the ISBA as far as ground handlers are concerned, because it's an internationally very high standard, it's a gold standard, and he has the same problem as we here have in India. The problem that he has and BAOA has over here is that we do not seem to differentiate, or the regulator does not differentiate airline activities or operations from JA operations. And therefore you see that all the rule position has been from airline-centric specifications. And that makes it very, very difficult for GA because there are cost implications. You don't have the structure and funding that airlines have. And therefore, when you look at the ISBO program, it's so beautifully done because you can scale up or down depending on the size of the operations. But if you're going in for the ISBO or the ISBA, as Fabio Gamba of EBA is doing, he's talking very closely with EASA. And EASA, for the first time, is listening. Because they're also in EASA, there's no differentiation between the general aircraft operators who are doing charter operations and airline operations. They are under one category called commercial operations, as you have in India. But they are listening. The regulator is listening. EASA is listening, and they're sitting down. In fact, EASA went so far as to invite Ed Boland's team from NBAA to come and talk, because NBAA is worried, US was worried, that if they go in for a regulatory or rule position out there that's going to affect BA operations into Europe, it's going to affect their bottom line. So that's the kind of interaction that's been taking place over there. That's the kind of interaction we need to have here in India. And it's really, I would say, encouraging to see that this sort of a meeting has taken place, or a conference is taking place for the first time. Because in India, I don't think there's any real forum where safety is discussed openly and in openness. This is probably the first time it's happening over here, where everybody's in a permit to voice their concerns, as I am voicing it over here. So NBAA, in spite of the fact that FAA has not mandated SMS implementation for general aviation aircraft, NBAA recommends to all its operators to implement it. And they carry out training programs, SMS training programs, NBAA. And in fact, they've been involved with IBAC in the 1990s in coming out and helping to finalize the ISBO program. And if you want to know more about it, Dr. Kurt Edwards is here. He'll give you all the details regarding how they went about it. I don't think this is working. It's not moving forward.
Yeah, I think you're...
2 minutes? Okay. Situation is in India is that now you're faced as general aviation aircraft operators. If you're going to be operating to Europe and other places, you need to see whether you've got a safety standard as well implemented as is demanded by certain authorities going abroad, and you might as well gear up for it. So this is one thing that needs to be done. And our recommendation basically is, since I'm running out of time, that go in for the ISBO, because very well formatted, it meets all your requirements. It's been accepted by many agencies outside. And since they are accepted outside, we need to take up a case. If you want to go in for this ISBO standard, take it up with the regulator, go as a body led by the BAOA, have some more representation perhaps from the RWSI, get in people like KPMG along on your team, perhaps a legal person also, because there are legal implications as you start traveling outside the country. That brings me to the end of my talk. Any questions? I'll take it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commodore. I really apologize to cut you short, but we have one more session to go, and in their interest, questions. I know, we've covered almost everything, but if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Go ahead, please.
I have a question for Louis. Louis, thank you for talking about fractional ownership. I just have a question. In terms of rule making, what really needs to be done by the Indian regulators to make fractional ownership a legal model in India? Or nothing needs to be done, or something needs to be done? Because I do understand fractional ownership rules are slightly different, not only in terms of operations, also in terms of ownership patterns, taxation benefits, depreciation benefits. So could you just throw a little bit of light on that?
Sure. So even before you start the rulemaking on fractional, I think we need to sort out the aircraft management rules here in India, because I think one cannot supersede the other, or they go sort of hand in hand. But on the fractional side, you basically need to allow fractional ownership, which is a bit like buying a time sharing or buying an apartment in a set of in a building of flats. So if that's already allowed, you could do that. Now, I don't know the laws about that in India, but the reason that NetJets went into Portugal at the time was that there was only 2 countries in 1996 that allowed fractional on aircraft. One was the Netherlands, and the other one was Portugal. And nowadays, sort of just about everybody allows that, except for a couple of smaller countries, which we shan't name at the moment, which they only do private flying in any case.
What we are going to do is we'll further engage and take help from Roger and them to understand our laws and see what we can get their recommendations as to what we can do so that we can lobby with the government. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Any more questions, please? Can we have the mic there, please? I think the question which Rohit has is that we have rules which are more towards
that you cover and the rate. So the other legal terms are more or less standard.
Yeah, I think same as all the the MSP programs, and they have set guidelines and set rules, and then they say you can't.
They do have a very comprehensive set of documentation. I'm personally familiar with Pratt & Whitney's documentation from a recent project that I worked on. Of course, they need to be examined, and it's rather it's not really. In many ways, it's not a legal issue. I mean, what an experienced lawyer can bring to the team is experience across perhaps a number of different deals with different OEMs involved, different parties. It's really a combination of technical, financial, legal expertise, commercial as well, that needs to be brought to bear in an organised way. But sure, once this documentation arrives from the potential service provider, there may well be things in there that need to be negotiated. I know that comes down to bargaining power, and sometimes there may be a reluctance. But in my experience, if you can present to an OEM an argument that says, actually, this doesn't make sense for you or for us. There's a better way of addressing this. They're willing to listen. So I think you shouldn't just accept the standard documentation, because sometimes it can't be tailored to every single situation with every single operator in every single jurisdiction.
Thank you, Roger.
Thanks.
You got your answer. Anyone?
I just need to add to what he said. When you are talking about Airbus or Boeing, where you have a choice of engines, you can negotiate it in a much better way than the ones which are business aircraft, where the engines are given. Usually you find that the power by hour agreements, or even the agreements for the MSP, they are all basically pre-printed.
That's right. That's what I said.
They're only just filling the blanks. So there's very, very little scope for negotiation when you are buying only one or two of a type.
Yeah, correct.
And,
that's what I said.
And you don't have a competition for engine manufacturers. It's just take it or leave it.
Yeah, but as he says, we can still go through it, and if there are any things that are very peculiar to us that can be brought to the notice of OEMs, we have someone from JSSI, and they want to make a comment. Sure. They don't listen at all. JSSI, please.
Yeah, you mentioned Boeing and Airbus and choice of engines. There are also programs which are tailored for aircraft operators like you with 1 or 2 or 10 aircraft, and they are in different jurisdictions and in different utilization modes and all that. I can tell you that contracts can be negotiated. As you said, Roger, there are guidelines, but they're also always tailored so that they can be adapted and useful to the people who take it. So don't be afraid to negotiate contracts.
Thank you. No, thank you all, George. I think we've seen that. We are adding some pre-owned aircrafts in our fleet, and they have come forward to talk to us on our terms. So I'm sure there are ways to look at it, and we can get their help, legal help as well as when we need. Any more questions, please? I think you can hear me. Yeah, please.
So my question is that, with DGCA, as far as the SMS implementation is concerned, we're on the 4th phase, supposed to be, and I'm not aware of the ISBAO strictures. Are we anywhere near that, or is it, what I'm talking about, the stipulations given by the DGCA, does it measure up anyway to these standards, or it's...
I think we have a long way to go as far as SMS implementation is concerned, a very long way to go. And if you're looking at it from the point of view of international standards, and that's our experience. But, it's up to the DGCA to decide as to whether an operator has met the minimum requirements as per the CR which I've already specified. But I can see that there's a lot of doubt within the DGCA itself because they don't seem to have a capability to give guidelines which are detailed guidelines. And I think that's a problem area. It's global. It's not just with our DGCA because it needs education. SMS needs education. Everybody needs to buy into it. And it's a top-down approach. You have to have owners involved in it. You have to have OEMs involved in it. I mean, in the United States, MITRE carries out a program, a half-day program for board members and very high officials at big companies, at the level of directors or VPs, et cetera, half-day program at SMS. Because if they are not convinced about it, how is it going to go down? And therefore, you find, according to MITRE, in their research in the United States, the biggest barrier is at the level of line managers, that is heads of operations, heads of maintenance, head of HR, which includes finance. Because you need to release resources, you may need to release funds for certain aspects of safety. So it involves everybody. And over here you have something more. You have the accountable executive and the owners and the board members. How many of them have really attended? We've had 1 or 2 owners attending, very interesting to, and really great to see them there, but very few.
Thank you. Hey, Commodore, any more questions? I think we have. Yeah, sure.
Sorry. So, Captain Walsey, just to update you, to add what Air Commodore Ganapathy has just said, we've been engaged with DGCA now for over a year to actually get them to recognize ISBO as the standard of SMS for general aviation, and replace the CAP 3100 process by the ISBO standard. So anybody who's actually implements ISBO should be exempted from the CAP 3100 process. They have the engagement, I must admit, till the moment has not succeeded to the extent that we thought. We were supposed to have a workshop last week on the 13th, where the DGC officials were to be briefed by us on ISBO. It didn't happen last week. I know Group Captain Bali, Jayant Nadkarni here, Air Commodore Ganapathy have all been working hard on it. Hopefully, somewhere in the near future, we will get them to understand that people like us who are in general aviation do not need the CAP 3100 process. We should be able to do something like that. That's just to update you on what's been happening.
Yeah, thank you, Rohit. Any more questions? Yeah, Terry.
For Mr. Pinto, you have been very loyal to Dassault, and we thank you very much for that. I wanted to know if you are happy with your large fleet of Falcon 2000.
That's a very personal question.
We are happy.
I want to hear you.
With our entire fleet, thank you.
Yeah, happy, very good.
With the type fleet, huh, Terry?
So just to confirm that our contracts are very simple. Very simple.
Thank you so much. If you don't have more questions, we'd like to rest our session here. I think on our maiden business aviation conference, we've really drawn a very good conclusion. Since morning till now, it's a collaborative approach that's going to work. So we all need to collaborate more and more, and we all need to engage more and more. I also would like to invite all of you and advise all of you to get in touch with them for all that need, or through BAOA, because we'll definitely be in contact with them throughout. My heartfelt thanks to all of you. Thank you very much, and especially to you two for coming out all the way to be with us. Thank you so much. Okay, Which one?